Hello guys, welcome to another video. Now Necropolis launched over the weekend and I think it's fair to say that the reception of 3.24, at least in terms of the Necropolis League mechanic itself, has been quite mixed, with a lot of early complaints about the Lantern of Arimor, which forces a significant amount of difficulty onto the player, something which is rarely ever a thing in Path of Exile. Usually the League mechanic is very much an opt-in feature, but the Lantern cannot be avoided. There's also been a decent amount of feedback provided by the community about the other part of the League mechanic, that's the corpse collecting and crafting within the Necropolis morgue, and a lot of these issues stem from the user interface, which is not very pleasant to interact with. And I think it's fair to say that there weren't too many complaints about the actual potential of the crafting mechanic itself. Personally, I felt that the high-level crafts, when using the mechanic correctly, would be very powerful, but I just didn't enjoy interacting with the crafting, mostly because of the user interface. And so last night, GGG put out an official post for what they're working on in regards to the feedback received about Necropolis. It's worth noting here that this type of response would have been a day earlier, but Easter was being celebrated in many places over the weekend, and it was an extended weekend in New Zealand, so that's why the response was slightly slower. This post is from the game director himself, Mark Roberts, and he gets straight into it here. The post is split into two main sections. One is about the gameplay map to map, in regards to the Lantern of Arimor and collection of corpses, and the second part is about the crafting mechanic in the Necropolis morgue. So starting off, they're going to allow the itemization of corpses immediately within the map whenever you actually find a corpse, and as a result of this, they're removing the 1 Chaos Orb cost on purchasing coffins to itemize corpses. This is actually going to be quite a significant change, since players that don't want to engage with the crafting mechanic can now simply keep track of which corpses are valuable and be on the lookout for those specific crafting modifiers as and when they drop in maps. And whenever they do find a valuable corpse, they'll simply be able to itemize it directly in the map and immediately list it for sale when they return to their hideout after that map. They no longer need to do any extra steps there, which is really nice. I also enjoy this for solo self-found, where I want to store specific corpses, such as the ones that allow crafting of Necropolis unique items. So now whenever one of those unique craft corpses pops up, I can just itemize it immediately in the map and store it for later, and the whole process is much more streamlined, which is nice. Next up, the downside modifiers that appear on the Lantern of Arimor. This was a big contentious topic. They'll now exactly list how they're impacting the rates at which corpses and All Flame Embers are appearing. They'll also be improving not only the baseline rate at which collectible corpses and All Flame Embers are dropped, but also the increase to those drop rates that are provided by these difficulty modifiers imposed by the Lantern. The TLDR for this is that you'll now be seeing a lot more collectible corpses and All Flame Embers than before, and you'll be able to visibly see the change in drop rate that those Lantern modifiers are actually applying, so you can better arrange the mods on the Lantern to suit your needs. They're also adding new All Flame Embers that are more rewarding. We don't have any information about these just yet, but it's possible that they will add more content from past leagues like they did with the Trial of the Ancestors monster packs which drop tattoos. We'll need to wait and see for that one. Existing All Flame Ember pack size and rewards generated from those monsters are also being improved. Next is two potentially very significant changes, and I think these two changes right here are the ones which will impact the majority of players the most. If they get these right, then the feel of the gameplay loop in Necropolis will be massively improved. Firstly, they'll be making the devoted modifiers more rewarding. That's the gold modifiers on the Lantern, and they specifically mention the currency rewards here. So this will be modifiers like the ones which make specific monster packs drop Chaos Orbs or Divine Orbs, for example, and things like that. I hope that they get the balance right here. In my opinion, the rarer crafts like the Divine Orb drops typically felt okay as rare rewards, but the common rewards such as Fusings or Chaos Orbs felt very lackluster, so those ones need a big improvement. And secondly, they're lowering the danger of the more dangerous modifiers on the Lantern of Arimor, especially at endgame. So for this, I'd expect modifiers such as Physical Overwhelm, Elemental Penetration, and the more damage per pack member to be revised and made more appropriate, as those ones felt massively overtuned. And again, if they're able to get the balance of these correct with this change, the gameplay loop in Necropolis will feel so much better. Now, next up is the huge changes coming to the crafting mechanic itself, and I really do feel like this is going to end up being something very similar to Harvest League in terms of the items that we'll be able to craft. To begin with, probably the single biggest change in this list is that you'll now be able to simply choose the base type that you want to craft on. So if you're playing Bone Shatter, for example, you may want to make an axe, and so you'll be able to just choose a Despot axe to craft on. And this choice of bases will include all normal base types and won't include special base types such as Atlas or League specific bases. For those ones, you'll need to find special corpses, which I'd assume will somehow be tied to that type of content, like killing abyssal monsters for the chance to spawn a corpse with a crafting modifier to allow you to craft a Stygian Vise belt. But it's not mentioned here how that will work exactly, so we'll have to wait and see. As a result of this change, the corpse modifiers that allow you to influence the base type are being removed, which makes sense. And they're increasing the chances of finding the rarer corpse modifiers like fractured or mirrored outcomes. And they're also removing the tiers of most crafting modifiers, so they now just always drop as the previously highest tier. This basically means that you can expect to find rarer modifiers more often, but also that if you were skipping specific corpses that were weaker versions of modifiers, you can now pretty much guarantee that you'll always be wanting to collect most, if not all, of the corpses in that map, as a large majority of them will be very useful since they're always the highest tier now, and the impact of those corpses on crafts is higher now on average. Next is a very big change. They're replacing the specific tier rating crafts with a universal tier rating craft which will affect all modifiers in the pool. This one will actually be a nerf to very specific crafting scenarios, but for the majority of players, this is going to be another functional change that improves gameplay because you're less concerned about which corpse modifier is dropping. It's now universally useful no matter what item you're crafting, and so you want to collect pretty much all of those corpses. If you're not sure about how tier rating crafts work, they're probably the most powerful part of Necropolis crafting in that they allow you to basically block an amount of modifier tiers from spawning on a craft, so you can force high tier modifiers to spawn. I'll link Grimroad's video below which goes into detail about this, and that's a great video that I fully recommend if you feel like you're a bit behind on the crafting mechanic itself. Next up, a bunch of quality of life type changes for Necropolis. First, a functional gameplay change that will allow you to itemize corpses from the list of corpses presented by Aramor, rather than requiring you to actually find and click specific corpses in the morgue. And also, Control F will now go straight to search, saving you another click there as well. And probably the biggest of those three changes, the crafts on corpses in the list will now be displayed by type rather than by level. So you'll be able to much more easily find the types of crafts that you want to use for a specific craft, which again is less clicks and less time spent searching for modifiers. Lastly, the modifiers that roll sockets and links are being significantly buffed, but we don't know by how much just yet. Mark also goes on to say at the bottom of this post here that there's more happening behind the scenes, but these are the immediate changes that they want to make, and they'll be communicating more changes going forward. In terms of timeline, it looks like they're going to be shipping changes as and when they're ready, rather than one large patch with everything bundled together, so I'd expect to see things start shipping in as little as a day or two. Also mentioned in this post, which will be important for future releases, Mark says that the takeaway for GGG here is to not release expansions on public holiday weekends, as they didn't have the staff in place to respond quickly. There's no mention in this post about Tier 17 maps. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about those being unmodifiable, and also about them being significantly more difficult than Uber bosses, which doesn't feel right, but I expect they'll respond to this soon. For now, it looks like they just want to fix the League mechanic. Overall, I'm excited for these changes, especially the quality of life and the improvements to the lantern modifiers. I do think that the crafting is going to be completely bonkers. I fully expect Harvest 2.0 vibes, with players just printing items right out of PoE, but we'll have to wait and see. What do you think of these changes? I know that a lot of players had stepped away from the game already. Are these changes enough to bring you back to the league? Let me know by commenting below. And shout out to my channel supporters, I appreciate you. If you'd like to join them and support the channel, you can become a patron. All of the information can be found by following the link in the description below. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.